gentlemen, welcome to Afrobeat Live. We're getting ready to start the show tonight. The three-part conversation on uniting against police brutality and racism. Just want us to take a few minutes right now and share the links, invite our friends. If there's anyone that we think is going to be interested, share to all your friends if you can. So we're going to take a couple minutes, a few minutes to share show tonight to share.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Get the link. I hope everyone is doing good today. I know it's we're in crazy times right now. I hope you haven't been too upset. All right, I see the link here. I'm probably gonna get a YouTube link also. The year is we're already in June. We're already halfway through the year.
Halfway through, yeah.
COVID has taken probably 2 months, 3 months away. It's crazy.
What a year.
Crazy year, crazy
I think
year.
about January 1, we were all celebrating. Happened to get rid of 19 and boom, here we are.
I know. All right, a couple more shares and I think we'll be ready to go. Let's just build a little bit people to join us in because we don't want them to miss this.
Okay. I see Odunayo, she just joined. Thank you for joining, Odunayo.
All right, I think I have everyone who's shared to all the places I could possibly share.
Yeah. I see Nicola joined us as well, so thanks for joining.
Can I post this to the story?
Share to a few more platforms, to a few more friends, and then we'll. Okay.
All right, I think we're about ready to go.
Yep.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Afrobeat Live. My name is Michael Obedozie, the voice. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who is joining us for day one of this three-part conversation on uniting against police brutality and racism in America. Our theme for tonight is white voices in the midst of racial tension. As we all know, over the past 3 years, the age-long problem of institutionalized violence, police brutality, and racism in America has been emboldened. And as you know, Afrobeat Live caters to a demographic that is mainly African or Caribbean. And it seems as if we complain and we're in agony in our silos and have our different perspective about things. And tonight, we have two friends going to be joining us tonight, and they're going to be telling us how they feel about what's going on. We're going to be asking some critical questions to get their responses to understand how people who might not exactly be in our communities feel about what is going on. I want to remind you all one more time to please hit that share button so people can join in this critical conversation. I am not here tonight by myself. I am here with one of the members of the family, strategy and change professional, Mr. Carl Omatsola.
Good evening, Mike. Good evening, gentlemen. Tom and Matt, thanks for joining us today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've had discussions about this over the past 1 week, actually over the past couple of years. And it'd be great to have a good discussion today about how we can help to bridge the gap and start to solve some of the challenges that are endemic in this great country called America. Which I still consider to be the best country in the world and an ideal place to live out your dreams and with happiness, and the pursuit of happiness. So I'm really looking forward to a good discussion about how we can really bridge the gap and move forward in the society as a whole. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm just going to take some time right now to introduce my two friends in the house tonight. I served with these two gentlemen in the Army. We both deployed at separate times. I'm first going to introduce a man who is, my wife thinks is very, very handsome. His name is Mr. Thomas Denning. He's an educator, and he is actually a principal, an elementary school principal in the state of New Jersey. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, Obi. How you doing?
Awesome, awesome. And you guys are going to hear him call me Obi, and he's allowed to do so because in the Army, we're called by our last names, Obadozie, so everybody shortened my name to Obi. But for the rest of you, you can call me Michael, okay? And then my family members will call me Emeka. How are the kids doing, Tom?
My kids are great, man. I have my daughter's 9 and my son is 12, so time moves by real fast, man.
For some of us, we can get away from kids when we leave home, but you leave your kids at home and go meet the kids at school.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So the next person I'd like to introduce is another one of my friends. His name is Matt Durante. I call him my boo. That's what we used to call ourselves.
Yeah, boo boo.
Messing around. Hey, what's up, boo boo? And he's awesome. He's a CEO or Chief Operating Officer of a technology company in Richmond, Virginia. Introducing you all to Matt Durante.
Happy to be here, Michael. So happy that you asked me for this challenging conversation, quite frankly.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. So we're going to go right into it, but I just want to remind everyone again, please hit the share button so people can participate in this conversation. Remember to put your questions in the chat box. So the first question I want to ask, and this is to Tom and Tom first, and then Matt second. When you saw the video of Floyd, and just to give a little recap, so since March, there have been about 4 incidents that have culminated into the protests and the riots that we see today. Obviously, there have been so many more for years and years and years, but right now it's as if it's just crazy right now. So when you look at what's going on, if you watch the video of George Floyd with the officer's knee on his neck, what were your thoughts? What did you feel?
Man, there were so many thoughts going through my head at that time. For him, obviously, just sympathy for even being in that position. I mean, you know, having the military background, you know, we've been in situations where, you know, we are trained on use of force, you know, rules of engagement, you know, de-escalating situations, and you know, from the law enforcement side, it was so clear that the situation was de-escalated, and to see it continue, you know, you're waiting for the guy to get up. Like, what are you doing? That you have your people right there, you know. And then when you start hearing the bystanders, you know, asking to help, you know, hey, he's fine. You know, he needs to breathe. He's saying he can't breathe. Let me just check him out. You know, just from the bystander perspective, like, you know, you feel almost helplessness. You know, you're helpless watching it. That the bystanders who are a few feet away, they were helpless. You know, even though, you know, your initial reaction is you probably just want to charge the guy and get him off. You know, I mean, I'm sure everybody across the country looking back would love for somebody to do that. You know, and we all wish that happened, but really just disbelief, to be honest with you. Just disbelief.
Okay, I know. Matt, what did you think when you saw Officer Derek Chauvin with his knee on the neck of George Floyd?
There's outrage. There's, like Tom was saying, that was a subdued situation. And the job of a police officer is to protect, serve and protect, to include those in his custody. Now, it doesn't even matter what the police officer allegedly thinks that the man did. The point is that now we were prepped with the question, how did you feel watching the killing of George Floyd? But I think that that's mincing words. He was murdered. By the point he was subdued and that knee was on his neck, he was murdered. He was held down for 9+ minutes in an obvious choke position. And that officer failed to uphold his duties. And there's no world where that's even good policing. There's no manual that you're going to find that in.
Yeah.
It's outright murder, and that's directly, bluntly how I feel about that, and it's terrible.
Well, thank you. So Carl, what do you have to add to this?
I just couldn't believe it. I tell you, I mean, I was watching it and it was still, is this not real? This is kind of, this the movies or something. I was still confused. I was still thinking to myself, okay, get off this guy. Okay, he's down. Okay, maybe they'll frisk him. Maybe they'll put his hand up. Maybe they'll arrest him. Okay, get him off. And he's calling for his mother, man. He's calling for his mother. And somebody was saying that maybe he saw her as he was passing into the afterlife. Maybe he saw his mother who had died previously, in as a glimpse. But it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And this is not. And this is America, right? This is, where, I remember coming here, our hope was always going to be, no matter what happens, you have a fair shot, there's justice, the law is there to protect and serve, even though there are some bad apples, overwhelmingly there are people who are good, right? But then I realized something, the past couple of days is this is not about white or about black, or about even police officers or the community. This is about good and evil, frankly. It's about good and evil. And clearly this guy was evil for some reason, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. That even for an animal, you don't even treat an animal that way. You don't talk about a human being. So that was my thought, man, on that.
Yeah, I was personally in total shock, to the point that even till now I'm shaking. Like my you can't see, but my lower extremity is shaking for some reason. It was one of the most painful things that I've ever seen in my life.
You just do not treat a human being that way.
So that there's over the past few years, we've heard talk about Black Lives Matter, and some people find the term offensive. So I want to ask you, Tom, starting with Tom, I just want to find out from you, when you hear Black Lives Matter, what comes to your mind? What do you think about it?
For me, obviously, there's no doubt in my mind Black Lives Matter, but then you kind of ask the question in your head, well, why does that even have to be pronounced? Why do we need to even take that into consideration? We're talking about human lives, and then it makes you dig deeper. Well, why do you think somebody that is African American is gonna feel like they need to stand behind a comment like that or a cause like that? And I have a lot of conversations with some of my African American friends. But one of my best friends, another military buddy, he's older than me, George Lindsay. That's my brother. He would have died for me. I would have died for him. No questions asked. And it doesn't make sense to me that even has to be discussed nowadays. It's more of I don't know if it's because of the relationships I've formed over the years with people of other races that it's not on my radar. It shouldn't even be a question. Is how I perceive it.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So Matt, for you, when you hear Black Lives Matter, because a lot of people had a problem with it, they were like, "Oh, all lives matter. This life matters." What do you think when people cry out and say Black Lives Matter?
I think that it's endemic that there's still a major issue. I think that people use this as a defense mechanism for themselves to say, well, all lives matter. Well, of course, all lives matter. I'll paraphrase. and hate to bring comedy into this, but some comedian just recently said, yeah, it's like my house matters.
Yeah.
And then he goes, it's not that all houses don't matter, it's that my house is on fire right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My house matters. So Black Lives Matters. That house is on fire, and we need to support that. It's not that all lives don't matter. Of course, all lives matter, but we need to spot a major endemic issue that continues to pervade through our society and recognize it for what it is. It's not that all lives don't matter. Of course they do, but Black Lives Matter is an in-our-face message that this is a problem that still needs solving.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And as you said about the house, I was just thinking to myself, you have 4 kids, but one day one kid is really sick and has a temperature of 106. Yes, you love all your kids. Yes, all your kids matter. But at this point, this is the kid that needs attention. This is the kid that needs to go to the hospital. This is the kid that needs to be taken care of. And I think it's a problem with leadership not being able to see all of us as one. The people who supposedly make the laws and supposed to lead us, not seeing this problem. Carl?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at things, and you might kind of have many discussions around. I look at history. I look at things from a global perspective, and I think about empires such as Rome. Right, Rome was at one time one of probably the most powerful empire in human history, and nobody could conquer Rome. Nobody external could conquer Rome. The Germans tried it, the Goths tried it, but ultimately, what made Rome collapse was the corruption and the mismanagement that was endemic within the society itself, to the point where it fell apart because of its corruption within. That's my worry for the US at this point in time, that no one, not the Russians, not Chinese, not the Iranians can conquer this country. But if we continue down this path, it is not sustainable as a society, right? And ultimately, if we continue down this path of division and fighting and racism and discrimination amongst ourselves, ultimately, it results in the destruction of society. That's ultimately what's going to end up happening. I mean, I always talk about to my friends that, I came from Nigeria, where I grew up, under the Abacha and the Babangida years, where we were in the society as kids and growing up. We knew what it was like to be under a society that basically was a struggle society, where there was division, there was tribalism, there was mismanagement, there was corruption. We knew what the results are. They're still there to today. We see it, right? Devolution of the society to the point where there's lack of growth. If we're not careful, and we think this only affects Black people or white people, Asian people, we're going to get to that point. And that's my real worry, is that what are we going to leave for our kids going in the future? And we're only as strong as our weakest link. So to me, that's the worry. And in terms of the Black Lives Matter, of course, Black Lives Matter. It's and I like the analogy of the burning house, right? We all live in a row house or townhouses, but there's one on fire. And if you don't take care of that one that's on fire within the townhouse structure, everybody's going to catch fire, which is what's happening now. Right? I live in a townhouse, with 4 other townhouses. If there's a fire and don't take care of my townhouse, guess what? The next door neighbor, his house is going to catch fire.
Yeah,
so
I think
the emphasis is on
exactly
right now. This is the issue.
I think Tom wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to draw another analogy. I mean, from my perspective as a principal at a public school, we don't have a choice. We have to accept every student that comes to our building. And if you have a student that is struggling, or a student that is acting out, clearly it causes frustrations for some of the staff members or teachers or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have those conversations about it. It doesn't matter where people come from. They are here, and this is what you have to figure out. You have to find a solution to what is causing the problem. If a student is 3 grade levels behind, you're it. You got tagged in, and it doesn't matter where that problem came from. If it was because they came from a low socioeconomic family, if their teacher last year was out on maternity leave and they got poor instruction, none of that stuff matters. This is the hand you're dealt with, and you have to come up with a solution to the problem. And that's real world. You don't get to pick and choose who your neighbor is all the time, or who you have to work with, or whatever. You can fill in the blank on whatever. You don't get to pick. You have to find a way to exist and treat people like they matter. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
No, I think Tom raised a great point. I think, but the only caveat to that, Tom, is I think that's the way you think, right? That's the expectation you've placed on yourself, as in you have a responsibility because of the people you're in care of or charged with to make sure that they perform to the best ability, no matter how they come in. Not everyone has the mindset, and unfortunately, it just seems as if we hear. So I'll give you an example recently. So one of my kids has autism, right? And a couple of weeks ago, he went out the door. I was in a meeting. He went out the door, working at home, and walked about 2 miles off, right, to the donut store, right, because he likes donuts. And so we realized he was missing, and then we ran out the door, and we couldn't find him. The police officer found him, right, went to every single door, every door of the neighborhood looking for the parent of that child, right? The police officer was white, right? At that point in time, did she care that he was a black kid no, doing the duty to protect and serve. That's what's expected, right? This gentleman who killed this guy, clearly, whether he was black or white, to me, it was pure evil.
Yeah.
And it's an issue that I think as a society, we have to figure out, how do we get to a point where we have someone who's charged with protecting and serving, and they are able to do that, regardless of what color they are. That's the issue. And I really want us to make sure that we don't get into this, black and white. It's an issue of good and evil that we have to resolve.
Yeah.
How do you uphold good police work? That's a difficult question. I mean, certainly racial bias and prejudice is a part of that, but as you said, one drop of poison in the bucket poisons the water.
Right.
Right. But how do we hold accountable? Because even in so many incidences where there is one bad egg, it seems to be that they can continually get away with it because they're in a protected community. They seem to take care of themselves. I don't want to jump too far ahead. I don't know, but we need to bring back. Some communities do this, but civilian review boards of policing outside of the union that represents them themselves. Right. There have to be actions. There has to be more emphasis on the continuing education of these police officers. How can, especially with, let's use George Floyd's killer as an example. It comes out after the fact, of course, that he's been flagged countless times for poor behavior, judgment, whatever you want to call it, crimes, and continually got away with it. That's unacceptable for any police force.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Hey,
totally.
One more thing, Obi.
Yeah.
Hey, Carl, listen, I totally agree with you guys. At the end of the day, it comes down to leadership. I mean, it is a leadership issue because no matter if you're in charge of 20 people, okay, you cannot watch those 20 people every second of the day. You have to train them and instill in them the values that you feel are necessary to perform their duties, and you have to trust them that they're going to learn the ethics that you are teaching. And unless that is taught from the leadership position on down, you will continue to have bad apples no matter what organization you're in. And if there isn't a good structure in place to kind of see those levels, you're just not going, you're not going to push them out if you're not focusing on that.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to take a few comments from our Facebook. Thank you everyone for joining us once again. Odoai Onwosu, thank you for joining us. She says, looking forward to this discussion. I also have a comment here from Jada. Jada says, it was painful, disgusting, and a sense of helplessness to watch the murder in broad daylight on an American street in 2020. We have a comment here from Kelechi. Kelechi says, I am not sure if there are any questions being taken here, or where would I submit them? You can submit your questions right here, Kelechi. Just type them in and we'll see your questions. Lovely book says, a question for principal, education of real American history. That's a question for you. So we're going to come to that about educating our kids about real American history. Kelechi says, I do not think anyone is throwing a blanket and saying all cops are bad. However, it is overwhelmingly lopsided when we review unjust killings without a single iota of accountability. All right. Then we have a comment here from Loveland. She says, a great discussion. Let's rise up. That's my mother-in-law, if you don't know. She's a cool mama. Let's rise up and keep talking. Where'd that comment go to? Let's rise up and keep talking about this wicked acts of abuse of fellow humans when people would not even beat their dogs. Okay, so let's go back to that question. We just found one question. The question is talking about education, American history. So we're going to answer that question, but I was about to talk about this right before I saw that question. So I'd like you to answer both of them. And I want to go to the beginning, in a way, slavery, right? What is it like growing up in a home where you're white and you have white parents? What is the conversation about what America is? Does it just start from our wars and how powerful and great we are? Or does it talk about slavery and what happened before we got to this point? And then you can go ahead and talk about American history in schools, about the entire history, not just a portion of it.
You want me to go first?
Yes.
Personally, coming from a white family, you obviously get your parents' perspective on things. My folks were both from North Jersey, Jersey City. My dad, my mom, North Bergen, which, is an urban area, but, they were grown up on work ethic. That's what they were taught, and that was what they instilled. We didn't really grow up in a diverse area. My folks moved further and further away from where they were born. So I wasn't in an extremely diverse area. So there weren't a lot of conversations about race, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, again, it was more just acceptance. And again, my dad was an educator too. So, I always kind of followed in his footsteps about, acceptance and things like that. When it comes to teaching history in school, I don't purport to be a history major. I was more of a math guy, but obviously I do see what is taught in history classes. I was at the middle school level. A lot of things have shifted in education to where we're trying to look at more civics. So, for example, 8th grade, there's a huge unit on civics where some of our teachers put together projects that are student-driven, student-led to promote a cause. And for one example, a girl was, I want to say she was adopted from, I want to say it was Asia. I don't remember exactly where, but one of the foundations that helped her get adopted was very important to her. So the entire class took on that goal, and they literally spent probably over a marking period planning it and raised close to $10,000, just coming together, promoting, and working together. And that's not, reading and memorizing stats, dates, things like that. That's what education is trying to do right now. It's not about, while some of those things are important, it's more about action now and getting students involved. So there has to be a balance of it, but we really want students to take ownership of their communities.
Yeah. I totally understand that. Just for me, I think that knowing where we're coming from will give, to another issue which I'll be talking about is implicit bias, will give children the perspective of, oh, wow, this is where we came from. This is how we happened. This is how we all arrived here. This is not just one person's country. The only person who actually owned it were the Indian America, or the Indians. And so we came in and we all came in. So I think in a way it's good to actually be practicalize what you do and how you live and how you treat others and understand where people are coming from. But I think that knowing the history will also help. Matt, the same set of questions.
So, Michael,
what are your thoughts about? Yeah, go
be
ahead.
prepared. I've got a lot to say about this, so I'm about to let it rip.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was also raised in the Northeast. Actually, I was on Long Island, in a poor area of Long Island. We were fairly culturally diverse, and then in high school at time moved down to Virginia, and into another diverse kind of area, but a very different dynamic from the north to the south. Once you cross that Mason-Dixon line, essentially. I do happen to be a history major.
Wow.
So
help me out here, buddy.
This is where I go. This is where I'm going. So I think that when we are educated, starting in elementary school, going all the way through where we end in high school, there is a tendency to glorify the foundations that we stand on. We emphasize the Constitution. We emphasize the bravery of the founding fathers from escaping tyranny. We know that there is slavery, but we underplay that in the minds of everybody until it is brought up again in the Civil War era, at which point is it about abolishing slavery. So then it's a good conversation. Once that occurs, there is still so much that gets glossed over, I think, involving Jim Crow, legal segregation, absolute, sharecropping, the aftermath, the antebellum era of the Civil War, where people were systematically separated out. Yes, you were free, but no, you were not equal. And so we kind of gloss over that in a way in favor of talking about World War I and II, and World War II, of course, probably being America's proudest moment because we were universally the good guys. We go D-Day, and then we hear about landing on the moon, and we talk about the civil rights movement briefly. We talk about 1920s women's suffrage. We talk about then segregation is still there in the Deep South. We talk about allowing Black people to enter into the same educational institutions as white people. We talk about Dr. King. We talk about Malcolm X. We have a very whitewashed view. I have a dream. Everybody can get on board with that. And then finally, civil rights passes, maybe culminating and continuing on with major milestones. For instance, like African-American women having finally the right to vote just in 1965. And that's not that long ago, 1965. Before then, a Black woman could not vote. That's less time than my grandmother was alive. Your parents remember that, depending on how old they are. And so we whitewash that because, at least in kind of a white household, in a white neighborhood, maybe not my neighborhood per se, because you're reminded if you're in more diverse settings, but if you're in the white house and I mean like a primarily white family, and you're in a demographic, in an area that doesn't have many minorities, the tendency is to say, well, civil rights happened, everybody is quote unquote legally equal now, so therefore that solved the problem. And then I don't know, racism wasn't widely discussed in our society except for these occasional pinpoints in the news. Rodney King was probably the first one that I remember as a kid coming up, the riots as a result of him, with police brutality, the same problem that we have now. And so we need to face that. I think that we need to show the less romantic version of our history. It is important to show us landing on the moon. That is a proud moment. The words of our Constitution are important. The Bill of Rights are important, but it's also important to continually emphasize the hypocrisy that when it was written, everybody was not in fact equal. Women, minorities, anybody who was not white.
Man.
So that permeates through society. And right now, I mean, maybe we could stand for, in our classes, losing a few of the old writers. Maybe we don't need as many Hemingway books. Maybe we need to bring, for example, like a Ta-Nehisi Coates into the picture, Between the World and Me.
Yeah.
Modern writing, maybe put into the young adult, like elementary schoolers. They read The Giver. They read some of these very important books to us. Don't get me wrong, but maybe add in Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. That's like such an endemic of, and that's what I say. Like reading about these things, if you're in an all-white area, or so, because basically people tend to clump together. For better or worse, you're born where you're born, you're raised by whomever you're raised with. And the only way to gain perspective is to seek it out and be educated by it. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to change your mindset, but you have to be open to the empathy. And that's a hard thing to do, to open yourself up to that, especially if you think you don't need it. I think everybody needs it, whether they believe they do or not. That's kind of how I feel about that.
Exactly. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go to Carl shortly, but let me read one more comment here.
Sure.
It's from Nicola. It says, why do you think we see so much silence on race and racism from the white community? Granted, today we see a lot of diverse protesters, but we need more conversation on dismantling the warped, I believe, thought process that a good number of cousins, friends, and neighbors may have. Carl, continue. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so, in my line of work, strategy and change, one of the key principles of changing anything, whether it's an organization, whether it's a process, whether it's a culture, is confronting the brutal facts, right? Confront the brutal facts. The first step of any change is confront the issue right head on. When you confront the issue and you understand the issue, then you can make decisions that will help to begin to resolve those. That's the fundamental principle. And I don't think it's comfortable for many people to really expose those issues and really begin to unpack them so we can better understand or acknowledge the role that has been played over time. That's probably why that's happening. America is, someone said, America is an ideal. It's not really not a land. It's an ideal. It's an ideal that every human being is equal and has the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and peace of happiness. Right. That's the ideal. The reality is where we are right now is the principle. There are issues that right now that we're looking to close between the ideal and where we are currently. And over the past couple of years, we seem to be going further and further and further away from that ideal. And what I want to do is try to figure out how we can begin to bridge that gap. Mike, you talk about your education. Here's a question I'll have for you. When I was in Nigeria, going to school in Nigeria, nobody taught me about racism. Nobody taught me about my fellow Black Americans who were taken as slaves from Nigeria and from the West Coast all the way through to the US. They didn't teach that in school, right?
No.
Even in college, when I went to school in Nigerian college, nobody taught us about that, right? I had to go on myself and educate myself about the horrors of slavery and the reason why, slavery happened. I wrote a piece recently, I think I shared it with you, about what I call the betrayal of our kinfolk, right?
Yeah.
The betrayal of we Africans selling our brothers and sisters into slavery for what? For mirrors and for muskets and all that stuff. So there is a culpability across the globe around us, right? The fueling the issue of this, and this kind of thought process has permeated society, and we haven't talked about it well enough. We need to begin to address this. Think about the Holocaust and the Jews. They talk about it. They explain it. There are museums everywhere that talk about what happened, and that's helped to heal the divide and bridge the divide, right, amongst Jewish people and non-Jewish people. The same thing needs to happen. The more we can talk about these things and begin to realize the mistakes and correct them, the better we'll be going forward to form a more perfect union, in my estimation.
Thank you, Carl. We're going to be going to the next question. Just remember to hit the share button. We're in our 40th minute, and I'm going to be asking more questions, but let me read a few more comments. So I have somebody responding to Nicola. It says it is uncomfortable for them to face who wants to talk about what they don't want to acknowledge or take responsibility for. And this is addressing the issue of very few white people wanting to speak up as boldly as Matt or Tom is speaking tonight. And whenever these type of things happen, it's just silence. From the other side is silence, none of the hashtag, nothing is going on. It's just like, we don't know, maybe they might have done something. Let's wait and see. And it keeps going on. We have another comment here from Kelechi. Kelechi says, in the military, we have avenues for everyone to report or speak to anything that may have been perceived. 1 second, I can't see this clearly. That may have been perceived to be an injustice, all the way up to an IG complaint. How does one engage peacefully, safely, without feeling like it is maybe a life sacrifice to engage when law enforcement is publicly taking the life of a citizen? And that's very correct. We were in the military, and even though the military is not perfect, as he said, you can complain, and you can complain. If your chain of command does not listen, you can go all the way up to the IG. And most times when you get to the IG, something happens about that complaint. So let's just tackle that a little bit, talking about police and police brutality. So the police is on top of a person, and everybody's watching. And for me, let me just give my response. For me, when that happens, I feel like if somebody jumps in and pushes the officer off, it can't be that one person, because they're liable to turn everything on that person that pushed the police officer off of him, saying he came to attack me. You understand? So what do you think holds us back, Tom, from not jumping in these situations instead of just talking about it and watching the police do what they do?
Fear. I think it's fear of being the one. You know, when you're faced in that moment, it's not always easy to make the right decision. You know, think about over the week prior to the George Floyd incident. You know, I'm watching the news every once in a while, and first we have the Aubrey, I forget the guy's.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
Ahmaud Arbery. We had that situation, which took forever for law enforcement to step in. And then maybe a day or two later, I'm watching, you know, some female walk her dog in Central Park and accuse another black male of threatening her life, even though he was just asking her to leash her dog. Yeah. And it's just amazing how it's not a coincidence that these things happen. You know, nobody's looking to, you know, fictionalize what's going on. These things are happening, and you know, it just, I don't know, it just came at us in such a short glimpse, and it also just felt like the right moment in our country right now for there to be protesting and for there to bring light to it. You know, you never want to see somebody lose their life over it, but I hope, you know, from the history perspective, I hope we can look back to today and this time around that this was a changing point in America.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you about that. Yes. So Matt, could you address that about the fear? Tom says it's fear that people don't step in to push a police officer off. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's basic fear. The people standing around, do they want to be next? There's other police officers with them. If they step in, are they going to be the ones to get shot? If they're willing to do this to this man, what are they going to do to me? Right. I don't want to risk myself. I have my children with me, or whatever. It's unfortunate. I also think that the inaction of good people causes a lot of harm sometimes. That's not to blame the bystanders, because who knows? I wasn't there. I couldn't say what I would do. I'd probably stand around in shock. Shock does a lot to people too. All I can say is at least somebody actually captured it on video. I don't like that it was sensationalized. I think that it got a lot of clicks and a lot of shares because it's a sensational video. But what I hope is derived from it is that this is not an isolated incident. This is the latest incident of many. How many have not been caught on video?
Right.
Many.
So many.
Okay, we're gonna read another comment here from Elaine, she says, this gentleman is correct. That's speaking about Matt on how history is taught in America. I remember in ninth grade looking in my world history book and it having only one paragraph dedicated to African history. I remember I remember at that time asking how. So that's a really important issue. I think that if anybody's listening to us here, and Tom, you're a teacher also, and I think at some point you're going to become the Secretary for Education in New Jersey. Remember that we need to teach history in a certain way that gives us a clearer picture. So as children, because children come into the world innocent. No child is born racist. But when they come into the world, somebody begins to give them a certain type of information. So if they're going to go to school and get a full picture, it now helps down the line. The next question I want to ask is about implicit bias.
About what, Mike? Repeat.
About implicit bias.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, or implicit stereotypes. I got this question from a friend of mine, Jada. And so the question is, and if for anyone who doesn't know what implicit bias is, I know we're all educated, but I'll just explain. It's pretty much attributing a certain type of behavior to a certain group of people, right? So you see a black guy, you say, oh, he's African American. He's obviously lazy. He's African American. He's obviously stupid. Whatever it is that people do when they see a certain sort of people and say something about them. We can say it about Asians. We can say it about Indians. We can say it about different people. What do you guys think is a good way? I think we've identified one as what we're taught in school in terms of history, but what is a good way for us to break this mold of implicit bias? Tom. And no, Carl, you can go first because like Carl, you can go.
Yeah. So back a few years ago, when I was working at a certain company, I actually was one of the guys who was a teacher for multiculturalism and diversity. And one of the things I was teaching was about implicit bias and why it happens. Now the way to overcome that is by really training and educating yourself and recognizing your own biases. I'll give you an example, Mike. Even in Nigeria, for example, right? Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba guy will say, don't go marry you, Igbo guy, or don't go marry Hausa guy, or they're like this, like that. That's also implicit bias. It's a human condition that we all inherit as part of growing up as a child. Now, how do you overcome that? It's by, in my opinion, education, right? And recognizing your biases and looking for ways in which to halt them or correct those biases over and over again until they basically fade away. That's my own objective. Now, what did we train people on? It was basically how to recognize your own biases and looking for tools that you can leverage to overcome those biases so that you are, when you make decisions, you're not making them based on those biases that you already have.
Yeah, thank you. Tom, you can go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of what Carl was saying. I mean, I love that perspective because the only way to kind of free yourself from that is to look from other perspectives and to take an empathetic approach and put yourself in another person's shoes. And obviously we're talking about race tonight, but it is important as a white man to understand that I don't know what it's like to be a black man in America and try and put myself in that person's shoes, you know, and run through scenarios in my head on what that looks like as a black man and how has that been different for me as a white person. So seeing other perspectives, it has to be taught. It has to be taught.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to read a comment before I go to Matt. Neka says, and that's my wife, she says, you know, we're not sensitized that way. Okay, so Jada first made a comment. She says, you lost me with this culpability of Africans. I think that's the call, selling our kinfolk. Let's not adopt the narrative of the oppressor when we are discussing this particular issue. The point is well taken, but it dilutes the issue of systemic racism in the United States. Then Neka says, you know, we're not sensitized that way. Having schooled in Europe, it is the same way. And then also, Jada says, also some white people find it difficult to acknowledge their privilege privilege, implicit biases, and selective anger. Can we take another one here? Val says, we are all doing all we can to heal from the pains our forefathers suffered during the slave trade. And now we are being hit with a bigger blow called racism. What a double tragedy. All right. So Matt, you can answer the question about implicit bias.
Well, it comes from, I think the underlying message is to identify the biases within yourself and confront them. In doing so, you're leaving yourself vulnerable, and that's very hard for people to do. That is why white people are so defensive when being called out on that is racist or this or that. Even in the process of learning, even the best of us, it feels uncomfortable to be perceived as racist. That's why you see so much tokenism these days. Oh no, don't worry about it. I have Black friends. I can't possibly be that way. I'm in a very diverse environment. I can't possibly be that way. I was born poor. I didn't have the same advantages as all white people. I couldn't possibly. But regardless, it's acknowledging that white privilege in the first place, which is it's very hard for some people to do. Because the fact of the matter is racism is a system. It's a system. It's not an act. It has many acts that follow with it. But there's 330 million people in America approximately. He was like 328. I'm paraphrasing. And still somewhere between 65 and 76% of the population is white. We make up the majority. It is what it is. Whereas, Black people are 13% of the population. That's according to like the last census that they tried to estimate in 2019.
Yeah.
So you're privileged by being the majority. So you're automatically thinking it's white people and then everybody else. It's ethnocentric. We don't even consider ourselves white people, right? We just consider ourselves people, and then there's a Black guy and there's an Asian. So that is built in, and that is the sort of thing that needs to be confronted. Why does it have to be us and them? Well, it starts with your eyes, and it starts with your parents. I remember it starts with it being taboo to talk about race.
Yeah.
I remember having my mother brought a friend from work home, an older Black gentleman, and I think probably as like a 1-year-old was the first time I could voice seeing a different kind of skin. And I remember making a point to looking at it and being shocked. I was like, oh, this is different. And my mom, and the gentleman was great. He said, don't worry, kid, it won't rub off. That's what he said. But my mom was so embarrassed of this simple act, which so we're desensitized in this way that it's taboo to mention that somebody is Black. And then I think later on we get, told that we can't talk about certain things and it's sensitive. So you have to hide any biases that you do have in fear of being, flagged as racist or otherwise. And maybe some of those sentiments are racist, but we need to be able to talk about them. It's very difficult in this age of social media too, because if you even well-intended say something properly or improperly or offensive, the whole world's gonna catch that, screenshot it, share it over and over again, and then there goes your career and your reputation and this and that. And I think we need to all mature to this new thing that is social media. It's serving in wonderful ways. It's capturing these videos that are being spread around so that we can see that there are these problems. It's also, destroying a lot of people that should be destroyed maybe. And then there are some people in the middle who are just, scared, even if they mean well, to speak up. And then so you get a lot of people, I'm going on a tangent now, but spinning and saying, and trying to share these social media posts or reaching out to their Black friends and saying, hey man, I got your back. Like, no, I'm one of the good ones. Don't worry. I'm one of the good ones. If you need me, bro, I got that. But that's not really doing anything. That's not activism. That's just, I mean, good intentions and sharing information are good, but that's not really solving the problem.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we're going to come back to solving the problem. I have a comment here that's going to allow us to segue to the current leader of the United States of America. Ty asks, how much do you think the person in the White House contributes to the comfort of the bad cops to think they can get away with anything, including murder? Carl.
Well, it's very clear. I mean, it's been documented and video, I think many times in campaigns that he's had about being tough on, yesterday, right? When they start looting, start shooting. How does a leader of the free world, in my opinion, I can't reconcile the leader of the free world making those kind of statements. It's a difficult act for me to understand at all. It really is difficult. They always say the fish rots from the head, right? So the North African saying, and clearly, in my opinion, if you look at the trajectory over the past couple of years, we've seen an uprising, an uptick in segregation, in racism, in discrimination, in violence. We've seen all these things. And instead of addressing these things and looking for the opportunity to heal and to bridge and to bring together, we seem to see a person who's trying to divide the populace, us against them, blue against red, the blacks against white, Mexicans, rapists, etc. Ban all Muslims. I mean, this is the leader of the free world. What makes this country great is the e pluribus unum, right? Out of many one. That's why people like us came here, because we saw the opportunity to try to contribute to the society as one and make things happen. Division will never, in my opinion, make this country great again as he wants to. We have to figure out a way to work together and rid this nation of this bias that we have. It's outstanding. It's ludicrous what we see coming from the mouth of the current occupant of the White House. It really is amazing to see that happen. It reminds me of my days, even back in Nigeria with Abacha and Babangida. They just never spoke like this. Even Mobutu never spoke like this. And this is America. This is America. So I'm just hoping and praying that enough people recognize that this is not the ideal that this country was founded upon, the ideals it stands for, whether they've been followed or not, and actually make a change in the next couple of months. Because we just need to get back to the point where we can start to rebuild the respect and the trust and move us into the right direction as we did before. Never been perfect, but at least closer to that ideal that I talked about earlier on.
Yeah. Tom, yeah, same question about the head. What the head, the president is doing? Is it affecting, emboldening people who are white supremacists? Is it making bad cops feel emboldened to do the things that they do?
Man, I have so many thoughts on this, and being a leader of a public school system, I've always kind of tap danced on talking politics and things like that. Even being in the military, stereotypes, right? If you're white, you're in the military, you're a Republican. If you're in education, you're a Democrat. And all of those stereotypes and all of those labels need to go away, because it's not about any of those things. It's about the skills of being a leader and leading people. And if the only words that are coming out of your mouth are attacks and divisiveness, you are demonstrating to everyone else below you that it is okay to do that. If I do that in my household with my wife and my children, and my kids emulate what I do, I taught them that.
Exactly.
I mean, that's as plain and as simple as it can be.
Thank you. Matt, same question.
Yes, I think that the guy from the top sets the tone, and the message is, unfortunately, it's not clear. It's whatever he wants it to be on the day, because he's He's an outspoken demagogue. He does his job by getting rises out of people. He's not, in my opinion, a good leader by any stretch of the word. He's a symptom of the problem. In fact, he rose to power out of these problems that we are talking about. And we need to, if we cannot combat it at the White House level, combat it at the most grassroots level possible. It makes it all that more important that we vote at our yearly local election. It makes it who's in the sheriff's office, who's a judge, who's on the school board. All of these things matter more than ever if you can't control what's in that White House. You can control your community. And I think people lose that and think that their vote doesn't count, but it really, really does.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to read a couple of comments here. Somebody says, Matt, you're getting a lot of fans here. Yeah. Somebody says, yeah, Virginia Bold says, you are so right, Mr. Matt. Thank you. We have a comment here from Ameza says, Tom for Secretary of Education. Somebody else says, absolutely, Matt. BB says, a major and massive symptom of the problem today. On point, Matt and Thomas. Yeah, so everyone is agreeing to this. And that brings me to my next question. This could be a long question, it could be a short question. But if after what has happened, and I'm not gonna be a hypocrite here, at the beginning of this presidency, and especially with the things that went on with the DNC and Hillary Clinton, wanted to give Trump a chance, okay? But at this point, do you guys think that if anyone still supports Trump or goes voting for Trump, that automatically makes them a racist? Carl?
No, I don't think so. You mentioned, it's funny because after the election, I thought to myself, I'm sure this guy's really, really smart. And if I were him, I would leverage this opportunity to bring people together and do the things that people really, really want, like healthcare, like education, right? Like building the economy, right? Infrastructure. It's a great opportunity to use all these business skills, right? To do these great things, right? Even this whole riot thing, this whole George Floyd thing that happened, it's an opportunity to turn the wheel and address this issue and bring people together and ask for justice. But he blew it. He completely blew it. And every time you think, hey, here's an opportunity, dude, for you to leverage all your media savvy to address an issue and use it as an opportunity to bring people together, it's not in his nature. It's not in his nature. So the ultimate question for me is, what do we have to do at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level to make the change that we need to make? Someone said, if systemic racism, the only way to get rid of systemic racism is to be strategic. And by strategic, I mean, first of all, local elections, community policing, training, getting people in power that we know have the same mindset that we also want. It has to start from that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally understood. Tom, yeah, same question. Do you think anybody who votes for Trump in this next election is a racist, going by the things he has said and done up till this point?
I think that's tough to pigeonhole everybody as a racist if they were to vote for him, because I think there's a lot of people that put their blinders on and live in their own life. And again, that's part of your responsibility as a citizen, is to be somewhat educated about what's going on in the national landscape. But from firsthand experience, I mean, I know people that, business is good. I go to work, I'm making money, so I'm voting for him. And that's how people think. They look at it simplistically. How does it affect me? Now, we need to have the discussion, like you're saying. We need to look at this big picture, and I think a lot of people internalize, how is it affecting me? It's just like when we were talking earlier about, do you jump in when, at that moment to knock the guy off his neck? Well, your first reaction is, well, how does it affect me? If you're the one that's pushing him off that guy's neck, you didn't worry about your personal safety. You thought bigger picture. You thought about a man's life and how, he was being affected, and you put your life aside and how it's going to affect you. So if I am an everyday working man or woman, and economy has been good for me, and it's been during Trump's presidency, and I want to put the blinders on and say, I'm for me. I've never made money. We've always been, poor or just, paycheck to paycheck, and now I got work. Why would I vote for anyone else? It's logic when you think of it like that, but when you're looking at the big picture, where our country is headed, the direction we're going, then you have to take that into account. So it depends on the perspective you're looking at,
Yeah, totally. I understand. I'm going to read two comments. They're directed at Matt so he can answer this question and talk about this. Nicola says, you know what you're talking about, Matt. Help us share with your cousins and friends. And then we have another comment about that says, yeah, that was the only comment. I have a comment here from Elaine. He says, but we are close to 30 years after the acquittal of the cops who beat Rodney King. It is a deep frustration for Blacks because there are videos, there is proof, and yet there still continues to be no justice. Elaine, on our second show on Saturday, it is the role of law and order. We're going to have a police officer, a law enforcement officer, and we're going to have a criminal defense attorney, and we're going to talk about this issue. So make sure you tune in. Matt, you can go ahead with the question.
You lost my train of thought. Go back for a second. Sorry.
Did you answer it at first? It's about if you vote for Trump after
this.
Yes.
Sorry. I got lost in the comments. I think that many of his voters will be racist. Absolutely. I think that that's by proxy. If I'm a racist in this country, and we know that there are plenty of them, who am I voting for?
Right.
So like A to B. Now, I also agree that there are some people who, like Tom said, either were not terribly affected by it or saw some sort of positive change from whatever policy was made. Everybody's affected differently, and therefore will continue to vote for him. I also think that there are those who are somewhere in between who are afraid of change. I often think that sometimes Donald Trump was a pendulum swinging the other direction from Barack Obama. I think that the fear was that, oh no, we're losing our whiteness. But that's crazy, as I said, because we still make up the majority. There are some interesting figures. And this is as of 2018, to show that we're not losing our whiteness or our power. We should use the strength that we have to be inclusive. The 10 richest Americans are 100% white and make up the 7 of the 10 richest people in the world. U.S. Congress is 90% white, as of 2018, mind you. U.S. governors, 96% white. Top military advisors right now, 100% white. President and vice president, 100% white. U.S. House Freedom Caucus, 99% white. U.S. presidential cabinet, 91% white. People who decide which TV shows we see, 93% white. People who decide which books we read, 90% white. That refers to education and all of that. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Teachers, 82% white. Owners of men's professional football teams, 97% white. And that's just a few of the major statistics that show they should not fear this change. There are still plenty of foundation. Who cares if it goes to a more diverse setting? I would think that our differences make us stronger. It's this tapestry of different opinions and thoughts and backgrounds that bring us closer together than anything. So that's a long meandering question or answer.
Hey, Matt, to take it even a step further, though, I mean, with the system that is in place, you know, and people might disagree on this, but we get two candidates to choose from. You know, yes, you can vote independent. Yes, you can vote for one of the other parties that may be listed. But at the end of the day, people who have more influence than you and I prop certain people up.
Absolutely.
To these two candidates that people feel like they have to choose from, you know, and in the upcoming election, your choice is going to be between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And if you don't like either of those two guys and you throw your vote at an independent or a Green Party or whatever other party,
it's absolutely wasted right now.
You feel like you're wasting your vote.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the past, I know personally I've voted on principle for voting for independent candidates. You know, it's not going to make a difference in how the election turns out, but there has to be a better way. And, you know, I don't know what the answer to fixing that systemic problem is, but
I don't know. I think that it has to do with us maturing with social media. I think social media has destroyed the moderate intellectual voice that can weigh both sides and has brought out the worst in the extremes of us. All we hear is the outrage on either side. And the problem is they're not having a discussion. They're tweeting at each other, oftentimes into echo chambers where the only response you're going to hear is people that agree with you or vehemently disagree with you. That's not a discussion. That's just a shouting match. And we're losing that. And it's very hard to make that person to person. I think that they should have real debates, not you know, we have beautiful long form podcasts and conversations like we're having right now. We're not interrupted. We can say what we like. We can really try to address how we feel, not a 3-second gotcha soundbite that's going to be sensationalized. Mm-hmm. Because I think that most people, even if they have a view that you don't agree with, once again, rounding back, start with empathy. Try to understand why it is they feel that way in the first place. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but at least we get there, you know?
Yeah. And it's funny too, how we've all had to adjust our lifestyles and our jobs and find a way to make it happen via Zoom chats and all of that other stuff. Yet, how many times have we seen politicians, leaders, you know, come to a platform like this and just be open and honest? And like you said, you know, the talking points, the visceral, you know, attacks and things like that. Why can't they do this?
Yeah.
No idea. It's just fear.
That's right. I'm money. Fear and money. I'm just going to read
a couple wrong thing. You're done.
I know. So I'm just going to read a couple of comments here. We're about to round up for today, but remember everyone that on Saturday we're having the day 2 of this conversation. I'm going to read a comment here from Kelechi. Okay, so we've been given 15 more minutes, 17 more minutes, so that's awesome. So Kelechi says implicit bias is corrected the same way they are created, using narratives that are culturally established. So using a new narrative is what will remove it, I think. And that's very correct. If we highlight whatever the minority is really and say, hey, every group of people has bad people in them, has good people in them, has wonderful people in them, has very intelligent people, not putting all of them in one box. I think that changes the demographic. As we all agree, the guy at the top is painting, he's weaponizing a lot of our fault lines to energize his base and continue to get the support that he gets from this chunk of people. Carl.
Mike, I just want to emphasize this point, that it's unfortunate that people think that this weaponizing of division ends with a race, because let's assume that it's successful and a group is marginalized. The next group that's going to happen is people with brown eyes or blue eyes. And then it's people with blonde hair or brown hair. And then it's people with black hair. It's an evil. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that just gains momentum and gains, and you basically feed the beast. If you keep dividing and dividing and dividing, people will always find differences. I'll give you an example. Again, going back to Nigeria, tribalism is a problem, right, Mike, or not? It's a massive problem.
You're correct.
And what color are we all in Nigeria? Tell me.
Black.
Right, but we speak different languages, we speak different dialects, even within the same ethnic group, they have different dialects, and there's still some tribalism. Unless you begin to recognize this issue of this human condition that seeks to divide and correct it with the implicit bias training, with being open-hearted, with the leadership training, with all those things, and put people in power who recognize that, it's going to basically self-perpetuate and end up in a disaster. That's my opinion. So while people may think, yeah, right now, okay, this guy on the top is dividing us and doing all those things, very quickly it's going to escalate. And it's only going to get worse until we address it.
Yeah. And I think that people on every side needs to take this seriously, because what you notice is that when things like this happen, we protest, we talk about it, and we go right back into whatever it is that we're doing, and nobody keeps up. People don't generally keep up the pressure. Take, for example, when Kaepernick decided to sit down, kneel down during the NFL games, not many people followed suit, and not many people understood what he was doing. And not many people really asked questions. People just made up something that he was disrespecting the flag, he was disrespecting the national anthem, right? And it came to a point where they said, okay, let's boycott the NFL. I did personally do it, right? But the problem is that many people are not. I hope this is a different time. I hope that this is not a time where people are going to forget about what happened and go back to business as usual, especially talking with my white friends, white brothers, white sisters. Everybody needs to be on it. Everybody has to check people at home and say, don't say that is not true. The conversation has to start from there for it to build out. So the next question I have is, what are your thoughts? Whenever an unarmed Black person is killed, the first thing that some of the news media outlets go to the police and other people is trying to defame the victim. He was a thief, he sold drugs, and all these things. What do you guys think about that tactic? That is, it happens. Just know it. Ahmaud Arbery became the guy who went to steal in someone's house. Nonsense. So what do you guys think about that, about how they go about it? Carl, you can go first, and then Tom.
The media's objective is always about money. It's about clicks, about views, about money, which is the root of part of the problem, right? You think about what happened over the past 4 years. And I talked about this, the way some media outlets were fanning the flames and zooming in on whatever he did, because it's about money. It's about clicks. They may care about some of the social issues, but ultimately, whatever generates the clicks, generates the views, is what they're going to look at, because it's all about the bottom line. It's about greed, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I mean, it's just hard. It's hard to wrap my head around it because, obviously money plays a factor into it. Money always plays a factor into it. So, news coverage is all about getting ratings, and no matter if you watch CNN, you watch Fox News, you watch, an obscure news station, whatever, they're all looking for ratings. And if they throw it up there and they're getting ratings, they're going to continue to show it.
Yeah. Fully understood. Matt?
Oh, I think ratings and money has a lot to do with it. I do think there's clickbait out there these days. I think showing whatever side of the story, even by trying to, even if the news outlet does believe that the person being arrested or shot is in the right, they'll oftentimes report more outlandishly about what they did in order to create more outrage. Outrage is the largest seller right now that we have.
Right.
It's unfortunate. I think it goes deeper than that, though. I will say that there's a system in place that seems to protect the police officer over the citizen, and I find that ironic, because that's not the job that those people sign up to do. When they, at least many of them, don't. They're there to protect and serve, like I said, to the citizens. And among your citizens are even those that you are accusing of whatever. And people say, well, I was scared, I didn't know what he was going to do. And many of us in the military understand that sort of fear of not knowing what's happening as you're going down the road in a convoy or something like that. But it still means that you have to be the one to take the high road every time, regardless of your feeling, because that is the job that you signed up for.
Yeah.
If you sign up to do a different kind of job, then that's the job that you signed up for, and you accept the risks involved with that job, and the duties of that job. And there are plenty of these police officers that I'm sure did what they did because they were afraid and they made a mistake, but they still needed to be prosecuted thusly, and it probably didn't happen. So we need to move better in that direction. It's understanding on all sides, but we can police the police if we do it at the grassroots level. If you get the correct district attorneys, commissioners, sheriffs, policymakers at your community level can take care of this, because it's very difficult to combat a public sector union like the police are. There are unions, which unions are some of the most protected. They're great because they prevent people from being exploited, and at the same time they're highly protective of their own. So there needs to be an external review. We have checks and balances inside of our government. I won't comment on how well they're working right now, but we have them theoretically to make sure. And I think they actually still do work, because we're still standing. Everything hasn't fallen. We need to make some very important decisions moving forward, or it's going to get worse.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But you work at the community that you can control, so that these things don't happen again. I mean, a lot of it is sensationalism, like the original point. But I think that there's still a system that needs addressing, that is protecting these repeat bad choices, especially, too many times.
Can I just chime in one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Because Matt made me think of something, and from what we've seen over the last few things, like for example, the police officer not being arrested right away, and having, you almost feel like there's cover up going on when these things happen, because it's blatantly obvious that these things happen, and then the public pressure forces the decision for it to happen. Then on the flip side, I want to say it was a few days later when a lot of the looting started in Minnesota, they arrested one of the CNN reporters,
Right.
and they had to release him. And you actually had the governor, I think it was the governor, that stood up and said, "My fault." He took ownership over the situation and said, "This should never happen." He didn't blame anybody for it. He said, "That should never happen." And we need to see more of that. And it reminded me of a book that I read, Extreme Ownership, from a former military guy. But the hardest thing to do is to take ownership over a situation where you directly didn't cause the problem. When you're in leadership, you don't do everything that's going on below you. You don't ask for those things to happen. They land on your doorstep, and you can either try and find a way to brush it under the rug, turn a blind eye, or address it straight on. And, or you can point the finger too. You can say, he acted out of sorts, we don't do this. Or you can just flat out say, I'm in charge, the buck stops with me, I take ownership over it, we got to figure out how to fix it. And that's two diametric opposites of what we've seen go on in leadership. And again, I really do feel like this all comes down to leadership. It has to start somewhere. We want it to start from the top. When you get people at the top making good leadership decisions, then you get the uprising and the swell of the ground, you know, mimicking those behaviors. And right now it's on the negative. We need to see it the other direction.
That's right. So I'm going to read a couple of comments. Elaine says the two-party system is a whole other discussion that we can do for hours. But you're right. At the end of the day, we vote for the lesser of two evils. Elaine also says social media also often equals misinformation. BB says part 2 discussion on Saturday with the police officers and the criminal defense lawyer. Thumbs up. We also have a comment here from Aya Conde. Great conversation, guys. Good job. Tunsky says united will stand and divided will fall. It is about time that white America unites with black America for America to degrade again. Nicola says, I voted today. By the way, I will forever vote on whatever is votable from now on. Okay, she's committing to making sure she votes for the things that she needs to vote for. We have many comments here, but we can't take all of them. Anyway, in rounding off, guys, one of the things I'd just like you guys to talk about, especially Tom and Matt, is what you can do on your level where you are to ensure that there's more awareness about this, and your friends, your family, and I know you can't force anybody to do anything, but I think that you guys are leaders of your families, you're leaders in your community, and if you're vocal about something, it kind of sends out certain signals also. So just for yourself, what is it that you can do, Tom, to say, I'm doing my own part here in ensuring that people know that police brutality is wrong and there is no space for racism in America?
Honestly, I think, you know, when you called me last week and you asked me to be on, you know, first of all, I was honored to be asked by you. You know, and then as the days went by leading up to today, you know, I actually felt guilty that I felt like I haven't done enough to partake in what's going on. And I felt like being part of this one show, you know, is a step in the right direction, but there's always more to be done. Whether it's speaking out about it, whether it's, you know, as a building leader and, you know, I have 800 kids in my school, you know, we try and influence them in a positive direction on a daily basis. That's my daily job. And, you know, but you kind of tend to forget about some of the things that don't go on in your day-to-day structure. And it's very easy to put the blinders on and not pay attention to, you know, big issues. Again, it's just take action is really the answer. You just have to make a decision to take some type of action to be a voice and be part of it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Matt.
Yes, it's grounded in action and genuine action. Action speaks louder than your fancy Instagram post. That's what I have to advise my fellow people. Shit, and actively using critical thinking and the destruction of misinformation, or at least stopping the spreading of it, is so important in this time. And it's very difficult to do, especially with everything designed to get a rise out of you. So critical thinking. What am I going to do specifically? My time and my money are important. There are things that you can donate to, freedom funds, the ACLU. Right now, as the protests go on, your local bailout funds. There are many different organizations. Local Black businesses you can go and shop at. Make sure that that you're taking care of your community, and then you'll see that spread and take care of itself. Actively read things that are outside of your perspective, your comfort zone. Make sure that you're reading things from Black authors And, so like I mentioned, like Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, there's a few books out right now that are excellent, that are new books. Real Life by Brandon Taylor, about being a Black student in Southern Alabama. Here For It by R. Eric Smith, who's a well-known gentleman who is an online journalist who wrote a bunch of essays about his experiences. The Hate You Give, I mentioned. There's a book that's really hard for white people to get on board with because it immediately starts with the title, and it's called White Fragility. And that book is entirely about why it's so hard to interact with us about our implicit biases. Because if anybody tells you they're colorblind, that's a nice sentiment, but it's just not true. Hey, Mike, you're Black. I'm a white guy. Nothing wrong with that. Acknowledge the differences and see how that works for us in our relationship. It creates a whole new dynamic. There's nothing wrong with us being different. In fact, that's where a lot of the beauty of the relationships come from. I love you. I love the time that we spent in the military together. We've had many deep conversations.
I love you too.
Boo boo. And so you got to take action. Educate yourself. Constantly open yourself to new experiences. Be willing to take off that turtle shell and be vulnerable and confront the things in yourself that are ugly. If somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I don't like how that sounds," they might not necessarily be right, but at least consider what your thoughts would be if they were correct. If they are actually right in calling you out on something. And once again, I've got to vote every single time for somebody who's going to make changes that I believe in, from my level to the state level, all the way up to the White House. And probably last but not least, and I think we all speak for this, I have many concerns about the cops and stuff. I know Carl spoke before about having an autistic child. My son, he's 5, he's also autistic, and I worry about how he's perceived in the world because he can't communicate the same way. He doesn't even think about things the same way. So, I worry about the one time that he gets angry or upset over something that's when he gets older, that people don't understand, that puts him in harm's way. And at the same time, unfortunately, in this society, I still think, well, at least he's white. Because, I mean that in the sense that these patterns are real.
Yeah, at least they'll come maybe slower at him.
And in that, speaking of children, and I think I know Tom's got kids, and Mike, you definitely have kids. I don't know about Carl, but what we can do is we can raise vehement anti-racists. That's what we need to do. The racism is always going to be there. It's always going to be there. So thinking that you're going to stamp it out is unrealistic. But what we can do is attack it over and over again. And one of the biggest sources of racism in this country is the white and Black, us versus them in that category. And if we can take that out, or at least move past it or mature past it, I want to say mature past it, because we're just still not there. And kind of defeat the historic superior white narrative that is existing right now in history, I think we'll be on better footing. And I think we're getting there. I think that sometimes these awful periods need to happen in order to push us in the right direction. And that's awful. I hate the violence. I hate the lives that are lost as a result. But if we keep filming it, and if we keep pressing correct information and fighting it, at some point the right things will happen. Or like Carl said earlier, we'll completely be destroyed. But I'll tell you, but if we don't come together and solve it, I don't necessarily know that I'm so proud of this country. I think it's the best country in the world. But we have some issues that we need to solve. And if we can't solve them, I don't want to see that message ruined. I don't want to see us not be the greatest country in the world. Trump said, "Let's make America great again." I don't know when it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, so let's really make it great. Let's finish the job that civil rights started that we haven't really finished. We brushed it under the carpet. Anyway, sorry to get so passionate and ramble on there.
I know. Carl, any last words?
No, for me, it's it's just to be a bridge builder. That's what I've committed to my life to do. That's what I want to do. That's what I'll keep doing. Is trying to build bridges across demographics, across races, across age groups, across everything that I can do to make a better life. To keep bending that arc of justice, right? Arc of morality towards justice. That's my role. I came here as an immigrant with high hopes and high dreams. America has given me a lot of great things. I'm grateful for it. I'm really grateful for this country. What's given me and my family. I mean, best country in the whole world for me. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm committed to building those bridges because that's the only way. That's what my religion teaches me. That's what I believe in my core heart. And that's what I intend to do, is to follow those teachings and love my neighbor as myself, regardless of what they look like, to be that good Samaritan that picks up the other person on the road when everybody abandons him or her. So that's what I want to do. And I'll keep doing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, Tom and Matt, for honoring our invitation. We really do appreciate it. Everyone, Saturday is going to be this day 2 of this 3-part conversation. We're going to be having and the theme is the role of law enforcement. Please share the flyers. We're going to send out another flyer, a new flyer with the new guests. And just stay safe, everyone. Let us continue to stay active and keep this at the forefront of our mind. In closing, I want to thank the ABL Afrobeat Live family. I also want to thank our producer for tonight, Taya Kimbani, for doing an amazing job. In closing, I am going to read a poem by Ekene Agabu. Ekene is a speaker. He's a relationship strategist. He's also going to be joining us for the day 3 of this conversation next week, Tuesday. And he has a poem, and it's titled Redemption Song. We are not what they say we are. They, not of a different race, but of a different mind that suggests superiority. While slavery and colonialism is what was done to us, redemption is what we must do within ourselves, separating ourselves from the superficial labels of oppression and aligning ourselves with the freedom that truth brings. Truth that is grounded in love and forgiveness, even of those who oppose our redemption. We stand here as a sign to the oppressed and maligned, that the final word is not with the oppressor, but in the Redeemer, that the responsibility of mental redemption is not given but taken by those who see themselves in that founding document, that all are created equal. Yeah. That all who move to the beat of the master's drum will now dance to the melody of their own song. Then all will hear the song, then all will sing the song, because you have become that song. Thank you, everyone. Until Saturday, Michael Obadozie, The Voice. See you on Saturday. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, everybody. Been an honor.
You guys can still stay on for a couple seconds.